There's actually a lot of stuff to talk about today. Another Canada Post strike is on the horizon. Trump ambushed the South African president with claims of a made-up genocide while a real one is underway in Gaza. And speaking of that, we need to kick off this video with some breaking news. The IDF shot in the direction of a delegation of diplomats from around the world while the group was in Jenin earlier today. That's the same place where Israeli troops shot and killed Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in 2022. So if they're willing to fire at journalists, at international diplomatic delegations, you can start to get a sense of just how dangerous life is for Palestinians in that area. Anyways, this latest bout of violence directed at members of the international community has sparked anger from the Canadian government. At 4:08 p.m. Eastern today, Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand posted on Twitter confirming that 4 Canadian personnel were part of the delegation in the West Bank when the IDF, quote, fired shots in their vicinity. She said she is, quote, relieved to know our team is safe, and added that Canada is now taking some initial and, in my opinion, long overdue and frankly quite timid action. Quote, I have asked my officials to summon Israel's ambassador to convey Canada's serious concerns. We expect a full investigation and accountability. We'll see how that turns out for Canada, but we aren't alone in pushing for answers. Spain, Italy, and France have also summoned their Israeli ambassadors to clarify the incident. But while we're at it, we should really ask the Israeli ambassador about the ongoing genocide, or the fact that civilians in Gaza are being starved to death as Israel deprives the region of humanitarian aid, which is a violation of international law. And while some aid trucks have started to be allowed to trickle in, it's far from enough to prevent the looming famine threat as people in Gaza starve, including thousands of babies. Meanwhile, as this literal genocide is ongoing, US President Donald Trump, who continues to arm the perpetrator, is busy rambling on about a made-up genocide. Now, Trump continues to do so much unhinged shit that it's actually hard to decide how much to include in a given video. But today, he just ambushed another world leader in the Oval Office. This time, it was the South African president who Trump hammered with totally debunked claims of a, quote, white genocide in South Africa. Multiple reports have found no evidence that this is happening. But what makes this especially egregious beyond the obvious racism at play here is the fact that, as I already mentioned, the US is literally arming Israel as it commits what Amnesty International and a UN special committee have found to be a genocide. But instead of doing anything about the actual genocide that he has powers to do something about, Trump is busy spreading baseless, made-up claims of a white genocide. What is wrong with this world? Anyways, there are just 2 other stories that I want to mention today. First, Canada Post workers are headed for a strike. The Crown Corporation just rejected the Canadian Union of Postal Workers' offer to delay the action, which is set to start on Friday. Canada Post's losses have been piling up as Amazon has swept in to offer cheaper, faster service at the expense of their underpaid and overworked employees. Not only that, but according to the Postal Workers Union, a huge part of the problem has actually been the spending decisions made by Canada Post management. Non-labor spending decisions. One thing I want to highlight as we head into this period of potential strike action is something that I actually brought up in the last Canada Post strike. In my video at the time, I reported on how the media's coverage focused disproportionately on the impacts of the strike on small businesses, while largely ignoring the worsening working conditions that the postal workers were fighting back against, like the fact that some mail carriers are having to use food banks, or that they're seeing Canada Post give more work to gig workers. I guess so that Canada Post can better compete in the race to the absolute bottom against companies like Amazon who treat their workers like this. So as this story continues to develop, think critically about the narratives you see and remember why these workers are fighting back. Because these fights don't just make conditions better for, in this case, the postal workers, but they matter for all workers. Like a past postal workers strike is literally the reason that Canadians won proper paid maternity leave. So stand together and don't let companies that are pursuing profits at the expense of your labor rights divide us. Last thing I'm going to mention is the fact that the G7 finance ministers are meeting in Banff right now. And there's honestly not a whole lot to say here right now. I'm kind of just letting you know what's happening. Heading into these money man talks, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne said there's a source of tension hanging over the 3 days of meetings, which the US officials are attending. You might be shocked to hear what that is. Yeah, it's Trump's tariffs. Yeah. So anyways, we'll see how these 3 days go. At the time I'm filming this, there have been no significant initial updates. That's all for now, but I'll be back tomorrow. And until then, what do you think of all this?